Leadership isn't just about having the power to make decisions, it's about the power to influence decision. On today's episode, we're going to push your thinking on what it means to lead when you don't have formal authority. And of course, back to do that for us is Dr. Lem Usita. Dr. Lem, what's up,
Yes,
dude?
yes, sir. What's going on, Dr. Mo? Hope things are going well for you.
We're on leadership lesson 17 today. Dr. Lem, before I get into my questions, why don't you tell us what inspired you to write it?
The leadership lesson number 17 has to do with selling and leadership. I realized that selling is a part of leadership, but not selling in the way that you think. It's not being a salesman selling a thing as much as it is an idea about selling vision, selling ideas. You're selling an idea so that you can influence decision.
We are selling ourselves every day, and leaders, it is your job to sell yourself and why people should follow you. So here's my first question for you. When you hear someone say that leadership is about decision making, what's your initial reaction?
My initial reaction is that it's definitely a huge part of leadership. In fact, we just recorded an episode, I think our last one had to do with being able to make decisions as a leader without all the information. It's a big part of leadership. This lesson focuses on decision making, but like you had mentioned earlier, like when you're not necessarily the top dog, when you're not, you can be a part of the decision making process, but you know, what's it like to sell your ideas in order to influence decisions?
Can you unpack the idea that leadership is also about selling ideas?
The idea is when you're in charge, you get to make the decision. I was on the president's cabinet. I was part of the executive team. I wasn't the president, but I got to be a part of the executive team. And I would bring ideas to cabinet meetings. I'd bring ideas to these team meetings. And like I would have to sell my idea. I'd have to share my vision of what I think we needed to do. Certain times they would look to me to make the decision, like this is your area. You can really influence what are you going to do about it. And then I could easily speak into it. But when there were things that were not necessarily in my area, I would have the opportunity to sell an idea, I share a vision, and hopefully influence that decision. And so that's what it is. Like leadership is, yes, you're at the top, you're making decisions, but you can also lead when you're not necessarily at the top. And part of that leadership is to be able to sell your ideas and share your vision.
How do
Yeah.
you help leaders shift from needing control to cultivating influence?
Anytime I think about a leadership that needs to control, I think back to that previous episode that we created, that we recorded about micromanaging and needing to have control over everything. I think there's a emotional intelligence and self-awareness that comes with cultivating influence. You need to be able to read the people, but also be aware of what's happening in yourself in order to communicate vision, in order to sell your ideas. And so, yes, for sure, you need a certain level of control. But if you need, like too much of that control, then you're not necessarily leading. You're just telling people what to do. And that's not leadership.
You've worked in a ton of nonprofits, education, fields where
Yeah.
authority is often limited. So, can you give an example of a time when you had to lead without having formal power?
Yeah, there was like when I thought through that, like there was a season when I was executive director of a nonprofit. So I did have the formal power to make decisions. But like you said, even then I had a board to report to. There was a constituency that really cared about the organization. There were donors, there were people that came to the organization, and to our programs. And so yeah, you still needed to be able to lead and sell ideas in that setting. When the organization lacks leadership, I mean, the job of the leader is to try to gather as much information as you can, talk to the right people, try to figure out what happened to get us in this situation, and then what we're going to do to get us out of this situation. And there's something about getting people excited about an idea. And when you can tap into that excitement, that idea will take off. There've been so many times where there was no movement in an organization that I was a part of, but sparking that excitement and sharing that vision of what could be is really exciting for people, and people want to be a part of that. Whether you're at the top, like you said, or just a part of, the crew, whether you have the formal power or not, Like, yeah, there's limited authority there, and you still have to sell your idea, and get people excited about it, even in that setting.
Harvard Business Publishing really emphasizes the selling side of leadership. So,
Yeah.
why do you think this idea is still so hard for some leaders to internalize?
I think it's hard for leaders to internalize because they lack the emotional intelligence, like I was mentioning earlier, or the self-awareness. They just think that because they're in leadership and they can make the decisions. And the character of the leader, the emotion side of people, like that's the things that they lack. I had a direct report come to me and yell at me, for a lot of things. One particular time, he came to yell at me about a raise, and then he threatened to quit if I didn't give him one. And so then I let him quit. I'm like, this is not the way to sell your ideas. You're trying to bully me into doing something for you, and they were trying to make their problem my problem, and it's just one of those things you just can't do as a leader. And I mean, it just wasn't working for him to try to sell this idea to me because he didn't have the emotional intelligence and the self-awareness to tap into something that'll move someone, you know what I mean? And so yeah, he ended up quitting.
Why do people do that? What's this guy's problem? Why would you ever think that if I just yell at my boss, my supervisor,
Same. It's because it's about him. You know what I mean? It's not about the larger organization. It's just and he did it when he was frustrated, and like I get it. We all get frustrated in our jobs. We all get frustrated with things, but to take it out on somebody, I mean, that's a little bit immature, you know what I mean? And so when you lack the self-awareness and sad, I mean, and it happens, don't get me wrong, like it happens, but he wasn't, I mean, he just quit, he just quit because he couldn't handle it. Just some people can't handle it. Now, I get people doing that because of they're frustrated, and that's okay. You can do that, but come back around. You know what I mean? And this guy just he didn't want to come back around. He didn't have the self-awareness. He didn't have the maturity to do that. He just wanted his own thing.
do you know where that guy is today? Is he successful?
I don't know. It's not worth my time to look up.
If this guy's somewhere, what do they do?
I think there's a limit to it. You might be able to do it for a season, but slowly you'll start losing people. You'll start losing interest, and you'll just bully people, and then you'll just continue to be a bully. You know what I mean? And you'll either need to quit, or people like this guy, or, people will they won't be able to handle you. It all catches up to you.
A lot of people hear the word selling, as you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier on, and they immediately think of manipulation,
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah.
What's a healthy definition of selling for leaders?
Yeah, it's not about manipulation or pressure. I think it's about educating and information. I think it's about inspiring and sharing a vision of what could be. It's about inciting that excitement in someone, tapping into the intrinsic motivation of someone to go do a thing. You're not going to get everybody, and that's okay. But let's see who we can inspire. Let's see who we can get excited about the vision, and then let's just do it together.
You said before that great leadership is really about alignment. How does the idea of alignment tie into selling an idea or vision?
Yeah, I think some leaders think leading is about being the loudest in the room, or being, just, the most extroverted and and you can get a lot of attention by being the loudest in the room. I think alignment is tapping into something deeper, like what we're talking about, excitement, that intrinsic motivation. It's that internal drive to a thing, getting people excited about doing something. And that's the kind of alignment that I'm talking about. I mean, if you yell loud enough and you throw enough money to a thing, you can get people to come. But as soon as you run out of money, as soon as the thing's over, they're not going to continue to follow you, right? When you tap into something internal, when you tap into something deeper, you get them excited about a vision. That's I think what we're talking about here. That's alignment. Leaders need to be able to tap into something deeper in order to move people. And if there's no alignment, then that's also a good time. That's also a good sign that's time to go.
Yeah, that's so true. And you're right. You can throw money. I mean, there's even studies that have been done that people love bonuses, but they want to be part of something. They want to be a part of something
Yeah,
bigger than they are. And
yeah,
if you don't end up giving people enough to want to buy into what you're doing, they're going to leave.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I love that. I mean, it's not about money, although money's great. If people want to make more money and a
yeah,
worker is due his wage, as the Apostle Paul once said, but you
yeah,
got to give people a reason to buy into what you're doing. And as John Maxwell says in 21 Laws of Leadership, people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision.
yeah, for sure.
So one of my favorite books is by a guy named Michael Useem. It's called Leading Up. And it's
Yeah,
about what to do when you're trying to influence people above you. And let's face it, as you said in the beginning, there's always somebody above us. There's always somebody that we need to influence that has more
yeah.
influence than we do in whatever particular place we're at on a team or at work or wherever. So, how do emotional intelligence and empathy show up when you're trying to influence somebody above you in the hierarchy?
Like knowing what motivates them, understanding their needs and concerns helps you to sell their vision accordingly. Now I'll give you an example. There's a guy that I worked for, and he's a good friend of mine, but I worked for him, and but he loved it when it was his idea, or if you could make it seem like it was his idea. And so another colleague of mine really helped me to, like, break through to this guy. You always give him like three ideas, right? One really good one and two awful ones, right? Because then when you do that, when you do it in that way, like he gets to choose. Then it's his choice. You see what I'm saying? And so it was just learning how people thought and learning how people, what motivated people. So I would come to meetings, I'd have the thing that I wanted to do, and then I have two horrible ideas, and I'm like, here's what we can do, the one that I want to do, and two others. Like, what do you think we should do? You know what I mean? And then he got to choose. Oh, I think you should choose, you know, the one idea that I wanted. Yeah, that's a great idea, boss. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and it's not, I don't know that that's manipulating as much as it is like just knowing that like that's what that person needed. That's what he needed, you know? And it didn't always work, like, but it was really interesting that we were able to get, you're able to get more done when you don't care who gets the credit, right? So
Yeah.
like I really didn't even like, it wasn't really about, manipulating as much as it was like this is the thing that's gonna work great, and in light of, his personality, that's what we needed to do. And so like knowing a person and knowing what motivates them, in his case, it needed to be his idea. So when I presented three ideas, like, I don't, because I would just come with like one idea. Oh, this is what we need to do. And he goes, "Ah, I didn't like that idea." But, three ideas, he gets to choose, works every time.
So, what's the difference between pushing an agenda and casting a vision that others want to buy into?
Sometimes it's the same, push pushing but pushing an agenda sounds selfish, right? And casting a vision for a thing is about others, right? Tapping into their intrinsic motivation, tapping into their passions and, the things that they're obsessed about. And so I think in some situations it looks the same, when you push an agenda and it casts the vision. But yeah, but that pushing an agenda just seems pretty selfish. It's about me, and then casting a vision is about others.
So, when we talk about selling skills, is selling a skill you can learn if you're not naturally persuasive? How have you seen this play out in your coaching? Because I know that you have a lot of clients that you help take through the art of being persuasive.
Yeah, you lead out of who you are. So, like, selling is a thing that I think everyone can and should do. Some people are going to be better at it than others, right? I think we can learn it to a point. And even if you're not a natural, just knowing this and having this category is a start. It helps you to think through your leadership and what it is that you're doing. Oh, maybe in this scenario, I need to sell an idea. Let me try selling this idea. So, like, yeah, you don't necessarily have to be incredible at it, but just again, having the category helps you in your leadership.
So, let's say that you're the boss, because you just mentioned when you deal with your boss, sometimes he doesn't want to hear things. So, let's say you
Yeah.
are the boss. How do you sell your vision and how do you know it's the right vision?
Well, if you're like we were saying, like I think there are two ways to do it. In some organizations, they're wanting you to provide vision, right? Bring vision to this organization. So I've seen that scenario, right? And then you just gather information, you bring a vision of this is what I think we can do. I think in other cases, there's a vision, like people already have a vision of what they think they should be doing. And then they bring you in as a leader to kind of, operationalize that, right? They bring you in to make that thing happen. Now, in that situation, you still have to sell your version and your vision of what you can do. And it may not necessarily align with what they can do. And so, yeah, I mean, I've seen those are the two situations that I've seen, right? Where people really don't have a vision, you bring a vision to the thing, or people have a vision and then you bring your vision to the thing. But in either case, like you're bringing your vision and you're having to sell, this is what I can see, this is who I am, and because if this is who I am, this is what I can do. And it may fit and it may not fit, but that's part of the process, I think. That's been my experience. So what would you do? How would you answer that question?
It comes back to having the right voices in your life. You can't put yourself in an echo chamber because if you do, people are just going to become yes men. And I don't want yes men in my life. I want people that challenge the things that I do. I want to get better because if I
Yeah,
don't get better, I'm going to think I'm doing the right thing for my people. And they're just going to
yeah.
be like, this guy's out to lunch. Is it harder to sell when you do have authority or is it easier?
I think again, it depends on the situation. Sometimes, the culture of the organization just doesn't want to do what it is that you want to do. I'm speaking out of experience on this one. Like this was a situation that I was in and I was an outsider, and so I came in and I brought vision, got people excited, and no one was involved, and that got people excited about the thing. And then once people started to get excited about things and started to re-engage, then they started asking, "Wait, who's this guy? Like we don't know this guy." And so then I didn't necessarily fit that culture, and they wanted to bring, they had an idea of what the thing was. And so, like, in my situation, it just wasn't a good fit, and that's okay. But I got things started. I got things happening. I'm pretty proud of the work that we did it that way. I just think leadership is just hard, and I think the higher you go, the harder it is. But you got to work with the culture. You got to work with the history. You got to work with the tradition. Interestingly enough, I'm looking at an opportunity of another organization, but they're younger. You know, it's instead of 100 years old, it's only 3 years old, and at 3 years old, like the culture isn't as set. So it's a little bit easier in that scenario. So yeah, the answer is it depends on the organization. It depends on so many factors. But at the end of the day, it's still tough. As it's still tough to lead because you got to bring people along.
So whether you're in a company that's 3 years old or 100 years old or somewhere in between, what are the signs that a leader is selling well? And even if you're not in charge,
Yeah, I've seen this happen. Even if you're not in charge, selling well looks like change in the organization. When you're able to impact change in the whole organization, when you're making it better, when you're challenging the status quo, that can happen at any level. You don't necessarily need to be the guy in charge. Just being a part of an organization, like you can impact and change that organization with the work that you do by selling your ideas, by sharing your vision, by bringing people along and, moving the organization forward. Yeah.
I guess my last question is if we're talking about practical leadership settings, you've mentioned the phrase lead from behind. Can you tell me how that fits into what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I think that in some situations, there are times when you lead from up front, and that's the lead role when you do have the authority to make those big decisions. But I think the focus of this particular article is when you're not necessarily the person from up front, when you're not necessarily the principal leader of the organization, you're with people, you're leading from behind, you're leading not as the person up front, you're leading as someone in the organization. And I think the idea is we could still impact the organization. We could still lead in the organization, even though you're not the person up front. And so I think that's the idea.
Leaders, the question for you is what's one idea that you believe in, but you haven't sold yet? And if there's something that you need to get better at, this is the leadership lesson for you. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share the podcast. Sign up for our free leadership newsletter. Comes out every month. Dr. Lem, as always, thanks, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next time.